When I was studying children and family ministry, one of the assignments I had was to ask a young child questions about God. This is probably the one assignment I'm going to remember for my entire life because I had no idea what I was in for. My youngest brother was about 7 at that time. We served as a family every Sunday at church and did devotionals occasionally at home. He was my test subject for this assignment. I asked him lots of questions and started to see for myself what the textbooks were saying. Kids start to form a picture of God way before we adults realize it. My little brother had clear ideas of how God related to people. The most memorable description he gave was when I asked how God talks to us. His eyes lit up, his hands flew to his face like this, and he said, "The world is small," like this. "And God is big. And when we pray to God, He listens, like this. And He hears everything we say." Now remember, even though we grew up in a loving Christian home, we didn't do devotionals every single night. We even stopped praying together as a family except at mealtimes. So how was it that this 7-year-old had such clear ideas of what God is like? Some people believe spiritual formation or discipleship begins at conception. Your habits as caregivers affect baby even before baby comes out of the womb. Others believe spiritual formation begins when baby enters the world. Your habits as caregivers affect baby once baby interacts with you face to face. Still, some believe spiritual formation begins when children are old enough to cognitively understand symbols and language and therefore the Bible. Regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, what's true across the board is this: spiritual formation begins early, way earlier than most people expect. And that's the catch. Most of the time, we as caregivers begin to form our children's picture of God before we know it. And before we know it, our kids have a picture of God we know nothing about. Research shows us that kids have a solid idea of what God is like by the age of 5. Now, this picture of God changes over time because kids go through life and have different experiences. But by and large, the core of who God is, what He's like, and how He relates to us as children, that stays the same. This core picture of God comes from us, the people who spend the most time with the child. And this is where the second catch comes in. The primary way we teach our kids about God is through relationship, especially our relationship with them. The attitudes we have, the tones with which we speak, the way we treat others, the level of respect we show our children, kids watch how we relate to people and they experience how we relate to them. And all of that is a direct reflection of God's character, whether we intend it to be or not, whether we want it to be or not. Developmentally, God has designed children to be very impressionable. That basically means if a kid looks up to you, he's gonna treat you like a god. Your word is final, your word is truth, you're always right, your wish is their command. For at least the first 5 years of life, you're pretty much the person they worship. They want your love, they want your attention, they want your approval, they want you all the time. That is God-intended impressionability. God makes kids this way so that you can show them what a relationship with a good father is like. And kids need to know what a good father is like because they're gonna need one. As much as you might hate to hear it, you are the spiritual leader of your home, simply because you have more influence on your kids, simply because of that God-intended impressionability. That means you run point on discipleship in your household. You don't have to do everything, but you definitely lead by example. You get to set the tone of spiritual growth for your family. Again, whether you want to or not. If you've got no idea where to begin, you're not alone. Here are 3 easy ways you can invest in your family's spiritual growth today. The first way you can invest in your family's spiritual growth is to use a prayer prompt to pray for your children and to make sure you put it somewhere you're going to be every day so you actually use it. A prayer prompt is great to use because it tells you exactly what to pray for. You don't have to sit there and think for 5 to 10 minutes to try to come up with something. It tells you specifically the Bible verse and the promise to pray over your children. If you're not sure where to put the prayer prompt, I've got 2 suggestions. First, you know that wall across the toilet in your favorite bathroom? You can put the prayer prompt there. If you don't have a favorite bathroom, you can take the prayer prompt, stick it in a protective case or laminate it, and then put it in your shower. If you'd like a prayer prompt to get started, I've got one linked in the description. The second way to invest in your family's spiritual growth is to listen to Christian music. This can be on the radio, a YouTube playlist, it can be on Spotify, whatever works best for you. Now, you don't have to listen to Christian music all the time, but you do want to listen to at least one song often enough so that everyone in your family catches on to the lyrics. Now, music itself isn't Christian or non-Christian, but lyrics are. The words we sing over and over again get stuck in our heads. You know this to be true. They become things that we tell ourselves and even things that we begin to believe are true. Listening to Christian music is important because we sing God's truth into our hearts, we sing it into our brains, and that's exactly where we need it so that we can stay on track to live out God's purpose for our life. Finally, one last way to invest in your family's spiritual growth is to pray together. This one's a little more time-consuming than the other 2. That's because it not only teaches the habit of prayer, but if your family isn't already doing it, it establishes time to strengthen relationships between family members by spending time together. Start by sharing one thing you learned that day. It can be something extraordinary and life-changing, or it can be something trivial, like a fact you read off of a popsicle stick. Follow that up by sharing one thing that made you smile that day and one thing that upset you. You can answer all of these questions at once, or you guys can all focus on one question at a time. Next, take turns identifying one thing each of you are grateful for. At least one thing, it can be more. After doing that, ask if anyone would like prayer for anything. This gives your kids a chance to share prayer requests, and it gives you, the caregiver, a chance to ask for prayer for yourself. This also gives your entire family a chance to pray over your family, to pray for specific things for your family. Finally, pray for one another. You can pray for the person on your left, you can pray for the person on your right, you can pray for the person across from you. Just make sure you pray together and for each other. You're not praying for yourself. There's no one right way to form your child's picture of God. And there's no one right picture of God, right? No one has all of God fit neatly into a single picture. He's just too big for that. No person is too old to throw out their idea of a broken God and trade it for a biblical one. The power of relationship with a Christ-like figure pointing to Christ can restore, renew, and redeem any child of God at any age. As a caregiver, that powerful relationship is yours to model and give. Our prayer is that you do so freely.